Is crime really decreasing in London? Well, according to people like Sebastian Salek, who is a councillor and a former political journalist, also writing threads on how Labour is fixing Britain, yes, apparently so. Now, I know that you might have lying eyes to disbelieve if you've boarded the tube or walked along the street or gone to areas like Wood Green anytime recently where you might have felt unsafe. You might have felt the need to take your Rolex watch off or ditch your jewellery if you're particularly wealthy going through boroughs like Chelsea or Kensington. And that's because there are roving bands of bandit clans who listen to drill rap and wear balaclavas over their face and scoot along the pavement on their electric e-bikes, snatching purses and phones out of people's hands, being caught on camera, of course, or dueling one another with machetes and occasionally killing a member of the public as they do battle for their honour. You might feel unsafe because of all those people, but don't worry, the graph is telling us that crime is actually going down. I'm going to address these claims in this video, but we'll start with this thread. Apparently, according to Sebastian, London is thriving and the right can't stand it. They talk down our capital city constantly, but the city is measurably becoming a better place to live. 6 facts to shatter their doom narrative. We go to the first one, which already has a community note on it. London is getting safer. Knife crime is now lower than it was in 2016. The murder rate fell 28% from 2019 to 2023. Now, note he says 2019, because we spent 2 years basically under house arrest, and London was entirely empty, so people couldn't go out and kill one another. And then it says to 2023. Right. What happened between 2021 and 2023? That would be the Boris wave, when millions of unwanted third world migrants, net tax dependents, 95% of whom we are paying to have here because they don't contribute anything fiscally, let alone culturally, that is when they came to this country. 47% of social housing in the capital city is occupied by foreign nationals, is headed by foreign nationals. That means even more is headed by second generation British-born British citizens, but of course, themselves, children of immigrants, who repeat the same criminal and economic patterns of their parents. And so, just an abstract hypothetical here. I know left-wingers struggle with per capita and abstract hypotheticals, but imagine how much lower the crime rate would be if none of those people were here. And the reason I say that is because per capita, disproportionately, those people are committing a lot of crime, including knife crime and murder. If we go to the Met Police itself, and the Mayor of London, and the London Assembly, where they're getting these statistics, despite making up only 13% of London's population, black Londoners account for 45% of London's knife murder victims, 61% of knife murder perpetrators, and 53% of knife crime perpetrators. So, this is largely black Londoners, so second-generation youths, largely in gangs, from Somalia, Nigeria, and the not-so-democratic Republic of Congo, who are just killing each other, and occasionally catching law-abiding members of the population in the crossfire. If you go to the Met Police's gang matrix as well, they've got a breakdown for between 2022 and 2024 for the ethnic compositions of their gangs. So the ethnicity breakdown: 72 white offenders, 364 black offenders, 28 Asian offenders, 16 other offenders, and 16 not recorded offenders. So the massive number of black offenders here. They're not just an overall majority, but it's even worse when you do per capita, because, well, they say 13% of London's total population. One, we don't actually know the demographic breakdown because the 2021 census is now wildly out of date thanks to the Boris wave. But of course, as well, 13% is not quite right because overwhelmingly they're male. There's literally one woman in the gang matrix here. So this will be black men between the ages of 16 and 30. So that's, what, 4% of the population are responsible for a disproportionate amount of knife, gun, and gang crime in the city. But don't worry, apparently it's all getting safer. Then we go on to this bit. London's air is getting cleaner. This is just an aside point, just to show how they distort facts. Ulez has apparently helped to achieve, that's the ultra-low emission zone tax that Sadiq Khan has imposed via surveillance cameras in London boroughs that recognise your licence plate and then charge you a fine every day if your car isn't Ulez compliant. Apparently it's achieved 54% less nitrogen oxide in London, 99% more clean air at monitoring sites versus 2019, and air quality improving faster than the rest of England. Bear in mind, I don't believe a word of this, because Sadiq Khan himself tried to hush up scientists who disputed his Ulez claims back in 2023. In private emails seen by The Telegraph, Shirley Rodriguez, the London Mayor's Deputy for Environment and Energy, told Professor Frank Kelly she was really disappointed that Imperial College London had publicised findings questioning the effectiveness of Ulez. Professor Kelly, a director of Imperial's Environmental Research Group, which has been paid more than £800,000 by Khan's office since 2021 to 2023, agreed to issue a statement, partly written by Rodriguez, saying Ulez had helped to dramatically reduce air pollution. So anything coming out of Sadiq Khan, or most of academia at this point, is just pravda. It's just propaganda to get you to abandon your independent means of transport and pay to subsidise a transport system that said black youths, disproportionately, are not paying for. This is why Robert Jenrick decided to do that video at the tube stations, catching people who were almost all white, but that's because, frankly, if you confronted a black youth, you're more likely to get stabbed, seeing the numbers, but for evading the fares by just barging through the barriers. Now, in my personal experience, because I travel into London quite a lot, and this is just a small sample, but anecdotes do build a broader picture, every single time I've seen this at London Bridge or on the London Underground, it has been black youths. And the reason is, if you permit dysfunctional behaviours for children from broken homes, which disproportionately black kids in Britain do have, then you are going to get more of that behaviour. You get more of what you tolerate. And so if calling young black kids on their poor behaviour is called racist, then nobody calls them out on their bad behaviour, even when it's killing other young black kids and costing law-abiding, tax-paying commuters a lot more money. You're just going to get more of that. Okay, on to the next claim. London is a diversity success story. This is genuinely a article of faith for these people. Like they will never renounce, no matter how much evidence you present to them, the idea that diversity is our strength, which is a slur, by the way, against the native population, because it implies that if we had not been subjected to mass migration, we've seen more migration since 1997 to 2025 than between 1066 and the Second World War. We were fine for over 1,000 years. But if we had not seen such wide levels of mass migration, then we would be weak and feeble and not worthy of note on our own terms. So diversity is our strength is an insult against the native population. Always remember that. But he claims over 300 languages spoken. That's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. It atomizes people. It means that people can never get to know one another's neighbors. Just there's this belief, Eric Kaufman writes about this in White Shift, by certain metropolitan liberals, that just more heterogeneity, more variety is itself exciting and bohemian, and their ability to tolerate it or express curiosity for it shows a virtuous open-mindedness on their part. Whereas the somewheres, in David Goodhart's formulation of somewhere versus anywhere, sort of rooted people who like creature comforts, who like familiarity, who like their neighbours, the community, their congregation, they are backwards and close-minded, and actually racist and exclusionary, because they don't want to open up their home, as in their national home, to everyone from anywhere with no hope of ever getting to know them. So, no, I don't agree with your value judgment that all of these languages is a success story. I think it's actually a social acid. 46% BAME population. So, they're just explicit about the fact that the growth of a non-white population is itself something to be celebrated, which implies that a homogeneous white population, let's say English population, is itself flawed, undesirable, immoral somehow. So, when they say diversity is our strength, they mean non-white people. And I don't want to judge based on skin colour, but they do. So, just understand the mindset of the people whose policies lead to more murders, more gang violence, and, as we'll see, more sexual assaults very shortly. And then finally, he says, and still no no-go zones. Well, not if you're a British woman. So, according to the Centre for Migration Control in new FOI data that they've produced, in 2024, between 40 and 47% of people charged in London for sexual offences, men charged, of course, were foreign nationals, despite them accounting for just a quarter of the capital's official population. Again, this is not by ethnicity, this is by nationality, because the British government is particularly opaque as to the data concerning the atrocities it has inflicted on us as a matter of its immigration policy, and so they don't provide an ethnic breakdown. But you can, by proxy, since the data we see in Denmark and the Netherlands shows that second-generation migrants repeat the same patterns as their parents, extrapolate out from this, if you were to have the ethnic data, that the levels of crime are much, much higher than just 50%. So, more than half of all sex offences committed in London are committed by non-Brits, as in non-natives. And they've got a league table here. At the top of that is Afghanistan. So Afghanistan, Afghan men commit sex offences at a rate 22 times that of British nationals. Again, not ethnicity breakdown, just passport breakdown. So some of those sex offenders on the British side of things will be British by paperwork only. But Afghans, as a matter of government policy by the last government, they took out a super injunction to hide it from us. Thousands of Afghans, including Taliban fighters, corrupt Afghan regime officials, militants and sex offenders, were imported here with the cost of at least £7 billion to the taxpayer without the public knowing about it until very recently. So it is British government policy to battery farm sex offenders at taxpayers' expense, and yet people like Sebastian think that's fine. You don't need to know about that. Actually, the government has been improving things by continuing this policy. Afghans were followed in the sex offender league table by Eritrea, Algeria, Somalia, Sudan, Albania, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, and Morocco. Now, other than Eritrea, which is a roughly 50-50 split, all of these are Muslim-majority countries. I'm seeing a pattern here. We can see a pattern just by looking at the state of the countries where these people are coming from. And turns out that the soil that a person stands on does not create the country that they live in. It's actually the people in aggregate that create the conditions of a country. And so if you move thousands of those people over here, especially young men, they're going to recreate the conditions of the country they fled. So if you import the third world, you get the third world, and you get the third world's treatment of women. We could just ban all of the foreign nationals from these countries from ever coming into Britain. But we don't. And so, if you're a woman and girl, walking around London, unprotected, without a chaperone, you are at risk. It is, in many areas, a no-go zone for you. But again, Sebastian just doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about our wives, sisters, mothers, and daughters who might be sexually assaulted by a man who never needed to be in this country in the first place. And yet again, every single one of these crimes is a consequence of government policy. It doesn't matter if overall crime is going down when you are still importing criminals. And every single crime that is committed by that foreign criminal never needed to happen. They never needed to be here. Which means that the government is to blame, and government policy can return them. They can stop them from ever coming in again, and we can actually have a safe capital city. We can actually have safe streets. We can actually see crime going down. But if you're running interference with lies like this, saying that actually all of these men being here and speaking their own languages and living according to their own customs is a good thing despite the sexual assaults, which he doesn't mention, if we have that mentality, then there will be more crimes committed like this. And the current government does. And who else has this mentality is Fraser Nelson. I feel, again, like the fish in SpongeBob. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? Fraser Nelson has been arguing with Nigel Farage because he's been attempting to keep reform on the Liberal plantation, and some within Reform have gotten wise to it and decided to get tougher on law and order instead. And by saying that there is a breakdown of law and order in the country, you are implicating mass immigration and multiculturalism as having failed. You are saying, as the statistics point out, that it is not the white British host majority who have gotten a lot more stabby or sexually assaulty in recent years. And it is also not the case that immigration has been an integration miracle, as Fraser Nelson once wrote. And even when presented with the facts of the Pakistani grooming gang scandal, even after inadvertently causing the national conversation to go global and cascade into the national inquiry that Labour have been dragged kicking and screaming to announcing, Fraser is still insisting this isn't a problem. So he knows exactly what he's doing, by the way. But Nigel Farage has said Britain is out of control. We all know crime is going up and not down. Most of us don't even bother to report it. And Fraser is going, Farage isn't fighting with me. He's fighting with 25 years of crime data, hospital A&E admissions data, and more. But perhaps it's a test. Can he get this lawless Britain narrative going in spite of the facts? The only way he would be able to get this lawless Britain narrative going is if people actually feel it for themselves. Because it's much harder to enforce a narrative that just isn't true onto people. You've got to build a kind of entire consensus reality, which Fraser Nelson has been an architect of throughout the Cameron years, insisting that mass immigration is just going all tickety-boo. But if Nigel Farage is just saying obviously true things, then yes, he will get people to have a preference cascade towards his message, Fraser. And I think that's what you're afraid of. Now, Fraser himself is citing data that doesn't stand up to scrutiny, because he's presenting this graph here from the crime survey for England and Wales, unavailable for 2020 to 2021 because of COVID-19, of course, which then points out, this massive data gap, which is the reason why knife crime is registering as lower in Sebastian's figures. But anyway, Fraser points to this, and it shows that crime is dropping till 2020, and then starting to tick up for all crime, for theft, for neighbourhood crime, and for violence. And Fraser is dismissing this as a non-issue. There's no such crime wave. Now, Adam Wren, who Fraser has blocked, along with me, because we are confronting him with uncomfortable facts, has broken this down in this tweet thread. So he says, lots of other data sets show crime is up. This one data set shows it's down. This is the crime survey for England and Wales. The problem is with their methodology, because they conduct face-to-face doorstep interviews about victimization rates. So that is entirely subjective. That is contorted by their sampling areas. So, as Adam points out here, they sample middle layer super output areas and lower level super output areas, meaning low density neighbourhoods. So they don't go to the most crime-ridden areas of London to conduct this survey. They also don't account for crimes like shoplifting, which helpfully former Home Secretary and then Prime Minister Theresa May decided to decriminalise below 250 quid, similar to the sort of thing that the Americans used to have in California, where below $1,000 shoplifting was free, and so you got these massive shoplifting gangs running in and raiding designer stores. So now you just get endless videos of inner city youths running into shops and clearing off the shelves, and this is why we now have security tags on things like coffee and meat, because social decay has happened to such an extent where shops are being raided for their steaks or their Nescafe. And security guards don't dare confront them, because one, the security guard could themselves be arrested for trying to defend the shop's property, but two, because these men might have knives, and they might be willing to use them, because they have no concept of compassion. They don't value life in and of itself. They think that your worth is instrumental to them getting what they want, and so they have no qualms about stabbing you to death for a packet of cigarettes. And this is the crime we're dealing with. And also, this crime has specifically gone up, according to whistleblowers in The Sun last week, from Westfield Shopping Centre and Oxford Street, who say that about 70% of all the shoplifting that they're seeing now is committed by asylum seekers, so illegal migrants living in hotels at British taxpayers' expense. That's not counted in this survey. So that's one of the leading crimes that's going up, as is all other types of theft, where you report it, you get given a crime number, and the police don't follow up on it and instead sit back at their desk with a couple of digestive biscuits to start monitoring tweets instead, including that new Home Office unit that is monitoring anti-migrant sentiment online. All of those crimes aren't included in this survey, and this survey has distorted methodology. So Adam points out the methodology uses single occupancy dwellings only, so no houses of multiple occupancy, and that includes young professionals living in London because it's too expensive to live on your own, but also the massive growth in houses of multiple occupancy because of mass immigration. And they say here, the justification, they oversample people living as one family in their own home, who are richer, in worse areas, because this is fine because of some pre-immigration report from 2008. So they're working off of data from 17 years ago. So again, none of this is trustworthy. And again, what crimes are being recorded. It asks if they've been personally victimized, and it doesn't measure crimes against businesses, shoplifting, or criminal damage. Now, criminal damage is part of the UK aesthetic that we see, where trains, shop fronts, monuments have all been defaced with inarticulate graffiti, as if the entire city is one great big third world shantytown. This isn't recorded either. I mean, look at the state of the tubes, that now vigilante gangs of graffiti cleaners have, from looking for growth, have had to go and clean and been reprimanded by TfL. Also doesn't include petty crimes like bumping the tube barriers, which has been chronic and they've only started to crack down on because Robert Jenrick embarrassed them. So all of this is fundamentally dishonest, and Adam wrote another post here just summarising this information and pointing out that people modify their behaviour to avoid being victimised. And this is the thing that Fraser Nelson doesn't understand. People will go into London less. People will visit their capital city less if they're afraid of being victimised. Now, I want to reiterate to Fraser Nelson, because, again, he cites this graph up here, saying that it's not a crime wave because it's barely ticking up. Fraser, can you imagine how much lower that graph would be if we weren't importing criminals? Because Adam makes the point somewhere in this thread that Britain's population is aging, Gen Z isn't drinking, which means that they are less likely to commit crimes, they're more likely to stay at home online on video games, which means that they're not going out and joining gangs. So who's committing the crimes? Well, if you go to the far-right outlet, the Global Organised Crime Index, and you hover over the UK, now, it is second of all countries in Western Europe for crime. It is 10th of all countries in Europe, of the 44 countries, and it is 61 of 193 countries for crime around the world. So if you change the indicator here, let's go to foreign actors, so crime by foreign actors, and go to the UK, we are number 1 in Western Europe, number 2 in all of Europe, and number 18 of all countries. So we are mass importing criminals from around the world. So if you think that this graph looks good, imagine how good it would look if we stopped importing criminals, Fraser. But Fraser Nelson, who says that the Boris wave of post-Brexit migration was an accident, not a conspiracy, who says it's actually a positive that Britain is the only country who is growing at 1% a year purely due to migration, because the working age population, not working population, he originally tweeted it out but deleted it because they aren't working, he thinks that's a positive, despite all of the crime they're committing, provably, in multiple instances, whether it's sex offences, whether it's theft, whether it's knife and gun crime, or whether it's just global organised crime the US government are tracking. And we know that Fraser knows this, because this is Fraser's long-term tactic. This clip was taken from 2016, and this is Fraser giving the game away about what he does. What he does, and what he advises the former Conservative government to do, is to act as a pressure release valve for public discontent anytime the Blairite, Cameronite, global neoliberal project arouses the ire of a population who have voted against mass migration in every election since 1974. What he says is, as a politician, all you have to do is say, I hear your concerns, while ignoring them, not doing anything substantive to address the issues, and continuing on with the project anyway.
What's her experience so far of her short premiership is if you persuade people that you're listening to what they have to say, that you don't reject their concerns as being bigoted or xenophobic, that if you talk in a language that is more in common with neglected voters than it is with the metropolitan fashionable elites, then that goes a long way. You don't have to come up with policies, banning immigrants or anything like that. All you need to do is to basically say to people, I hear your concerns. I mean, let's look at David Cameron. He actually, I think, did quite a good job here as well. Nobody expected him to win a majority in 2015, but he did. And he had a policy of cutting immigration by 2/3. Now, he completely failed in that target, but the fact that he had that target counted for a lot, because it meant people thought at least he wanted to control immigration. And there are a lot of parties in Europe right now, and governments in Europe, who wouldn't even say that they want to control it. They think that that is dark territory that they don't want to go down. Now, it's funny.
But are you saying that this is only psychology, that as long as you say the right things, people will appreciate that? And and that
I'm not saying
actual
it's-
results do not really matter.
I'm not saying it's only psychology, but I think a large part of it is empathy rather than psychology. Is trying to say to voters, I'm on the same wavelength as you, I understand your concerns, they are legitimate concerns. I mean, the concerns people have about immigration are all usually very, very rational. Where are these people going to live because housing is quite constrained? Where are they going to go to school? What impact will they have on the labour market? Will they mean my job is going to be less well paid? What about my children? Will they struggle to find a job? You need somebody to engage in that conversation. And when you do engage in that conversation, it goes a very, very long way towards establishing trust with the electorate and taking away the idea that nobody will listen to them apart from Le Pen and people like that. And this has always been the British way.
So, lie, gaslight them, pretend that you're going to do something, all the while telling them the reasons that they're concerned about their country becoming a strange land on their doorstep without them ever even asking are actually illegitimate, they're unwarranted, and confine the remit of legitimate concerns to purely logistical issues like school places, the busyness of the roads, the abundance of employment opportunities, and access to public services. Don't dare raise questions about identity, assimilation, cultural continuity, and crime. Notice he didn't even mention crime there. So Fraser Nelson has been pushing this line, deploying this tactic for years, nearly 10 years. And I must say, even his defenders at his former publication, The Spectator, who like him very much, are thinking, it's a bit transparent now. And the reason it's transparent is because it doesn't work in the day and age of social media where people can just pull your old clips or respond in real time to your lies with new facts and data. And this is why Fraser is so block happy, because he doesn't like people putting the corrections directly underneath his posts. Instead, if you ever encounter a Fraser Nelson tweet, go to the quote tweets and you'll find some factual information. But I want to return to Adam Wren's point here, because this is something that I saw yesterday when walking through Westminster. When he says that people augment their behaviours, that is true. The state also augments its behaviour in response to the crime that it permits. This is the concept of a narco tyranny, which Katie Lamb was talking about the other day on Peter McCormack's podcast. She understands this very well. And that is, if you do not have external borders, you will have internal borders. Diversity only works under the conditions of a dictatorship. And this is why now, for the first time in hundreds of years of history, outside Westminster Abbey, there are, being assembled, barriers and metal detectors, probably for knives and or guns, because they're anticipating some kind of terror attack. As I published on Courage Media and explained a few weeks ago in a Tomlinson Talks episode, there are rumblings within the intelligence services, within the police, within the government, that there is a jihadist attack imminent, and what site would be better than Westminster Abbey, where the king himself was crowned. We didn't need to have this before the benefits of diversity. There were no Englishmen who ran around with machetes dueling one another on Parliament Green. This was not a thing that needed to happen. This happened as a result of government policy. The government policies that Fraser Nelson and this Sebastian Salek chap and everyone in the Conservative Party that Nelson was advising supported. This doesn't need to happen. This can be undone by government policy. We could send all of these criminals home. We could never import them again. We could, as even Reform is suggesting now, build super prisons or send them to El Salvador in order to act as deterrents to serial offenders that join these London stabbing and shooting gangs. But for the time being, this injustice is being inflicted on us. Does this make you want to go to Westminster Abbey? Or does this discourage you alongside the ever-present threat of arbitrary violence, fatal arbitrary violence against you? Does this discourage you from visiting the landmarks and cultural heritage sites in your own capital city? Because we often talk about London as if it's lost. No, it's ours. Sorry, I was born here. Belongs to me, thank you very much. It doesn't belong to the Somali drill rap gangs that have made it borderline uninhabitable in most areas. So, does this make you want to go out there? And the answer is no. I observed this a little while ago when this scholar in question threw a footstool over the floor of the Stratford Westfield shopping centre and him and his friends recording it for TikTok or Instagram ran off. These were juvenile miscreants, and I observed the impact that this has on individual decisions, whether or not to go out to shopping centres or museums or landmarks. In this post, when this video went viral, I'm just going to read this. When people say London is dangerous or that London has no-go zones, they are not referring only to areas that have been rendered unrecognisable and unsafe by demographic and cultural change, like Whitechapel or Tower Hamlets. They are also talking about these arbitrary, unpredictable, random acts of violence. An increasing number of stabbings, thefts, wanton property damage, and performative Mizzy-style crimes for social media are committed disproportionately by the exact demographics who benefit from soft-touch anti-racist policing. Law-abiding Brits find this unpredictability too stressful to tolerate and do not trust the police enough to prevent crime and protect them. So they, like me, spend less time in the capital city outside work, because you can never know when you'll be a victim of crime by impulse-driven miscreants like this who have no conscience. And even if these people are caught on camera nearly killing someone, when it goes to trial, it's not that deep, they say. And they then have the charge of criminal damage that recklessly endangered life dropped. Now, bear in mind, I'm just going to rewind this to... Look how close that was to that man. Look how close it was to them. They nearly killed multiple people. And yet, they've had the charge dropped. Oh, and remember, by the way, that when they originally appeared in court, 14 and 15-year-olds, the sentencing, or rather the charges, were delayed at Stratford Magistrates Court. The hearing was adjourned by the magistrate Anita Prem, good British name, because both sets of the boys' parents required interpreters. So both sets of their parents can't speak English. They're living here, probably in social housing. They've raised their sons to be performative miscreants who delight in the suffering, including the death of others, just for kicks and clicks. And yet, the justice system bends over backwards, not only to pay for their interpreters, not only does the entire state and tax system incentivize keeping these people here, but also they then give them a lighter sentence by dropping the charge of criminal damage that recklessly endangered life. And that is despite the boys themselves being unrepentant about what they did. So the prosecutor, Elizabeth Ajayi, said it's fortunate that nobody was injured. Both boys, though, in a victim impact statement, who told the police, the one who threw the seat, it's not that deep, it didn't hit no one. Now again, even he can't speak English. But they just don't care. They will, as I put, they will go as far as killing you to amuse themselves and feel no guilt about it. London is full of these people, and you're trying to tell me, Fraser, Sebastian, that it's safer. No, London will not be safer until every one of these people is either locked up or gone, deported. They should not be here. And stop trying to gaslight me that everything in my capital city is just fine, because it isn't.